What's going on, guys? Welcome to Guys That Magic. We're going to be bringing you another one of our pre-constructed deck upgrades. This time around, we're going to be taking the Coven Counters deck and throwing another $300 at it, see what we can do with that kind of money. So joining me today is Hunter.
What up?
And then I am David, because I totally forgot to introduce myself there. All
Well
right.
done.
So I want to hear a little bit about this. So I know that when we made the $100 upgrade for this deck, you decided to kind of split it. And what I mean by that is like you built it with both of the, I guess, potential phase cards in mind. Whenever it comes to the $300 deck, are we still looking at that, or have you chosen to kind of focus on one more than the other?
Well, here's the thing. I really enjoyed building that deck last time. So yeah, I'm doing it again. What we're doing is we're making human tribal +1/+1 counter deck. And why are we doing that? Well, because you're able to swap either Lenore or Kyler out as your face commander, and the deck still runs exactly the same. In case you don't remember what Lenore does, we have Lenore Autumn Sovereign, which is 2 mana, a green and a white for a 0/4 human noble. It's got Coven. It says at the beginning of combat on your turn, put a +1/+1 counter on up to one target creature you control. Then, if you control 3 or more creatures with different powers, draw a card. So essentially, with all the 1/1 counter stuff that we have in the deck, we're able to manipulate people's powers, triggering that Coven pretty easily, getting able to draw a card. And on the flip side, if you wanted to switch out the commander card, you could put in Kyler. That's Sigardian Emissary. Kyler is 3 and a green and a white for a 2/2 human cleric. States whenever another human enters the battlefield under your control, put a 1/1 counter on Kyler. Other humans you control get +1/+1 for each counter on Kyler. So again, this is the human tribal aspect. We want all humans in this deck, and it pumps other humans. So pretty good human commander. Again, human tribal counters. That's what we're doing.
All right, so kind of buffing up the same thing that we were running with for the last one, for the $100 build.
Exactly.
So now that you have a little bit more cash to play around with, what are some of the big ticket items, or what are some of the things that really caught your attention that you wanted to throw into this list?
Well, because we're playing with a bigger price point, I have to go big when it comes to counters. And that includes 2 cards that I think are extremely important green counter cards. The first one is Doubling Season. Doubling Season is a $71 card that is taking up almost a third of the $300 budget with one card. But it is so crucial to a counter deck and a token deck, which our deck does make a little bit of tokens. We'll get to that later. But what Doubling Season does is it costs 4 and a green for an enchantment. It states if an effect would create 1 or more tokens under your control, it creates twice that many of those tokens instead. And it also says if an effect would put 1 or more counters on a permanent you control, it puts twice that many of those counters on that permanent instead. So a crucial card, doubling everything that we're putting counters on, doubling any tokens that we create. It's a must-needed card. The other card that I'm throwing in here that's also a bit pricey is the Great Henge. The Great Henge is 7 and 2 green for a legendary artifact. It states this spell costs X less to cast, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. You can tap it, add 2 green, you gain 2 life, and it says whenever a non-token creature enters a battlefield under your control, put a 1/1 counter on it and draw a card. So the synergy with the Great Henge is insane with this deck. And
Pretty solid.
I'm also keeping the Moonsilver Key in the deck because, that Moonsilver Key goes and grabs you an artifact. You can go and grab this one.
So just kind of like a quick question here, because I do see that 2 of these cards, if you add up the total price, it's about $110, give or take a little bit here. Would you say, considering that these make up about a third of the budget for your $300 deck, that these are super pivotal? Or if you are going to be, I guess, upgrading into this $300 list, is this something that you would maybe want to wait on to upgrade last? Some of the last pieces that you would want to grab? Or do you think this might just is so super important you need to get these into the deck as soon as you possibly can?
I'm going with the latter. I think there's a reason these cards are expensive. Both of these cards are so good, especially for those counter decks, and that's what we're doing. So I feel like these are definite pivotal pieces that our deck kind of builds around these two cards.
Wait, all right. So, what are some of the other ways that you have included to help maybe add some counters onto your creatures in this deck?
Well, I'm adding a bunch of stuff that makes different counters. First one, I'm adding Felidar Retreat. Felidar Retreat is 3 and a white for an enchantment. It's got landfall. Says whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, choose one. You can create a 2/2 white cat beast creature token, or put a 1/1 counter on each creature you control. Those creatures gain vigilance until end of turn. I can tell you what, right now, whenever you put a land in the field, you're not making cats. You're just gonna go ahead and make counters and give all your creatures vigilance because that's exactly what our deck wants to do.
Yeah, that's really strong. Although, if you have doubling season in play, you can make 2 cats.
You know what? You could make 2 cats, but you also are putting 2 counters on each creature.
Yeah, that's
So
probably still better.
that seems way better. The other card we're adding is Branching Evolution. Branching Evolution is 2 and a green for an enchantment. States if one or more 1/1 counters would be put on a creature you control, put twice that many 1/1 counters on that instead. With doubling season, you're kind of doubling. So counters galore. Another enchantment we're adding is Cathar's Crusade, which is 3 and 2 white. That states whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, put a 1/1 counter on each creature you control. Again, counter. And lastly, the most important enchantment in any counter deck is Hardened Scales. Hardened Scales is 1 green mana for an enchantment that states if one or more +1/+1 counters would be put on a creature you control, put that many +1/+1/+1 counter, or put on it instead. And with doubling season, it all gets kind of nutty. And of course, with all those counters, you have to have another card, and that is the Ozolith. The Ozolith is 1 mana for a legendary artifact. It states whenever a creature you control leaves the battlefield, if it had counters on it, put all those counters on the Ozolith. At the beginning of combat on your turn, if the Ozolith has counters on it, you may put all counters from the Ozolith onto the target creature. So we're just essentially moving all the counters that you lost onto another creature, sorry.
Yeah, that's kind of your board wipe insurance. Just in case you have this fat board, they go ahead and wipe it, and then you have, I don't know, 100 +1/+1 counters or something like that. You jump onto the Ozolith, and then your next thing just gets way huge.
Exactly. It's kind of like a saving grace for yourself as well in case you need to board wipe. Because if you board wipe, you get to keep all those counters still. You get to
Sweet.
keep all that work.
So talk me through what are some of the other additions that you've made to this deck?
Well, this deck, I added some mana help. I think it was very important to add some mana help. And one of the best white cards in all of EDH, ever since it was first printed, is Smothering Tithe. I know Smothering Tithe is a $30 card. Again, it's up there in price. But after Smothering Tithe, all of these cards that you're seeing on this list are under $15. I know I'm not going to go through the prices of all of them. If you want to see prices on all these cards, feel free to open up on another tab. We have the description down below. In the description down below, we have the deck list itself, which have all the prices of all the cards at the cheapest you can get. So I'm not going to go through the prices of all of them, but I'm going through the most expensive just in case you don't want to add those cards or whatever. So this card is Smothering Tithe, one of the best white enchantments in the game. It is 3 and a white that states whenever an opponent draws a card, that player may pay 2. If that player doesn't, you create a colorless treasure artifact token with sack. This artifact, tap sack, add a mana of any color. It gets pretty nutty very quickly. A lot of the times in EDH, people don't like to pay that 2 right up front, right at the beginning of the upkeep.
It's definitely one of my favorite cards for EDH. Whenever I know I have a Dockside Extortionist in my hand, just because it's like those counters or those counters, those tokens don't matter because I'll be making just as many.
And if you have Smothering Tithe with doubling season, you're making 2 treasures. It's pretty cool. Some other mana help I'm adding to the deck because it fits our colors so perfectly is Mirari's Wake. Mirari's Wake is 3, a green and a white for an enchantment that states creatures you control get +1/+1. And it says whenever you tap a land for mana, add 1 mana of any type that land produced. So all your mana now, or all your lands now tap for 2. So, and this card has taken a nosedive. I know I said I wasn't going to talk about prices, but it's a $5 card. I remember buying this for $30.
Yeah, it's pretty solid. It has gotten a couple of reprints, or at least a couple of big reprints. Hopefully
Yeah.
that continues. Maybe we'll get one for Smothering Tide someday.
We never know.
So I know that you mentioned that you didn't want to talk about, like, I guess the cat tribal or whatnot whenever it came to Felidar Retreat, but talk me through your reasoning on these next 2 cards.
Okay, I know what you're going to say, that they're cats, yada, yada, yada. But these are planeswalkers. They're both a Johnny. We got a Johnny the Great-Hearted and a Johnny Mentor of the Heroes. First things first, let's talk about Johnny the Great-Hearted. He is 2, a green and a white, with starting 5 loyalty. He has a static ability that says creatures you control have vigilance. +1 ability that says you gain 3 life. He's got a -2 ability that says put a 1/1 counter on each creature you control and a loyalty counter on each other planeswalker you control. Pretty cool. And the other one is a Johnny Mentor of Heroes. Johnny Mentor of Heroes is 3 and a green and a white for a starting loyalty of 4. It has a +1 that says distribute 3 1/1 counters among 1, 2, or 3 target creatures you control. It also has another +1 that says look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal an aura, creature, or planeswalker card from among them. Put it in your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. And then it has an ultimate at a -8 that just says you gain 100 life. And I think that is cool. I mean, you probably won't use it, but I think it's pretty cool that you have the ability to gain 100 life if you need to, if you're really dying.
Unless you are really dying, the house is on fire. The lawn is on fire. You are on fire. Everything's on fire. You're never going to -8 this.
Yeah, but this Johnny Mentor of Heroes is actually very good because it does the counter thing. And like I said, again, I'm going to keep referencing doubling season. But you're distributing 6 counters. And then it also has a pseudo card draw in there that gets you more humans.
Oh, I wasn't talking poorly about this card. I think both of his +1s feed into the synergy that you're going for, but just like never hit that -8.
I mean, if you have doubling season, you're going to be doubling it twice. So you're going to be hitting that 8 very quickly.
You're right. And then at that point, this card basically just says you don't die yet.
I mean, if you need 100 life, go ahead and get it.
All right, let's fix up some of the other areas that this deck was lacking. And what do you got next?
I added a little extra removal. I know we have Swords to Plowshares in this deck. That's great. We got a couple of board wipes. That's also great. But I had to add one of the best instant removals, which is Path to Exile. Path to Exile is 1 white for an instant. It says exile target creature. Its controller may search their library for a basic land card, put that onto the battlefield tapped, shuffle the library. I also added Generous Gift. Generous Gift is 2 and a white for an instant. Destroy target permanent. Its controller creates a 3/3 green elephant creature token. Especially Generous Gift if there's like an enchantment or something else that you need to get rid of. Pop it. Give him an elephant.
Sounds solid.
Yeah.
All right, so
go ahead.
You take it.
I was gonna say the next couple of cards we got because we are tribal. Dun 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 dun. I added a couple of cards that fit especially well with tribal themed decks. I think they are a must-have, especially this newer card I'll talk about last. But first one is Herald's Horn. Herald's Horn is 3 mana for an artifact. It says as Herald's Horn enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. You're going to be saying human. Creature spells you cast of the chosen type cost 1 less to cast. And at the beginning of your upkeep, look at the top card of your library. If it's a creature card of the chosen type, you may reveal it and put it in your hand. So again, pseudo card draw. The other one that is essential to all tribal decks is Vanquisher's Banner. Vanquisher's Banner is 5 mana for an artifact. It says, as Vanquisher's Banner enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Again, we're going to be saying humans. Creatures you control of the chosen type get +1/+1. Whenever you cast a creature spell of the chosen type, draw a card. Look, more card draw. And the final card that I feel like really fits this deck is Realm Walker. Realm Walker is actually a newer card from Kaldheim. It is 2 mana and a green for a 2/3 shapeshifter. It's a changeling, which means this card is every creature type, so it counts as a human. It says as Realm Walker enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Once again, we're saying humans. You may look at the top card of your library anytime. You may cast creature spells of the chosen type from the top of your library. Very, very good card. And
Really solid.
surprisingly not that expensive.
Also, I love these kinds of effects. They help you dig a little bit deeper. They help you kind of like set up for other turns. And if you are me and you need a card, you can look at the top card of your library like 12 times, see that it is still a forest, and be super, super disappointed every time.
Doesn't that happen all the time?
Oh, dude, that's exactly why these cards were printed, so that I know that I'm going to hit another land drop, especially whenever I hit like 7 in a row.
Some other things that I added into this, I know I talked about it in the $100 budget, but I'm also adding it into the $300 budget. This is the Thalia package. Once again, we've got Thalia's Lieutenant, Thalia Guardian of Thraben, Thalia Heretic Cathar, all these quote Thalia cards. I know Thalia's Lieutenant isn't actually Thalia, but it's still super important. So what Thalia's Lieutenant does, Thalia's Lieutenant is 1 and a white for a 1/1 human soldier. It states when it enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on each other human you control. And it also says whenever another human enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on Thalia's Lieutenant. So it works with all of our humans and counters. The other two Thalias are just kind of disruptors. First one, Thalia's Guardian of Thraben, is 1 and a white for a 2/1 human soldier with first strike. Says non-creature spells cost 1 more to cast. Don't forget that is also affecting you. This is a world spell or a world effect. And finally, Thalia Heretic Cathar is 2 and a white for a 3/2 human soldier. It's got first strike as well, and it says creatures and non-basic lands your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped. So that really affects opponents.
I'm very interested in the inclusion for Thalia, Guardian of Thraben in this deck, especially since you've talked and built up effects like Doubling Season so much. And I know that you have you have a lot of enchantments that are really building up on the +1/+1 counters, plus your planeswalkers and stuff like that. So it's an interesting inclusion for me.
I'm adding this because I don't like to get countered. So maybe 1 more to cast will stop a counter or stop disruption. I'm just trying to disrupt my opponent from doing stuff that I don't like, and a lot of those spells are pests. So I don't want my stuff to die.
Now we good.
Some other humans I'm throwing straight into this deck because they are too good not to. I think we got to talk about Champion of the Parish first, just because this is probably the best 1-drop you can get in the deck. Champion of the Parish is 1 white for a 1/1 human soldier that says whenever another human enters the battlefield under your control, put a 1/1 counter on Champion of the Parish. Simple, short, sweet, adds counters to the guy. We have all humans. It's going well. Another human that I said about last time is Esper Sentinel. Esper Sentinel is amazing. It is 1 white for a 1/1 human soldier. Whenever an opponent casts their first non-creature spell each turn, draw a card, unless that player pays X, where X is Esper Sentinel's power. A lot of the times they're not going to pay for 1, but if you put a counter on Esper Sentinel, they're definitely not going to pay. So you can just keep drawing cards.
I love how you start off with Champion of the Parish as being a great 1-drop, and then you immediately mention another 1-drop that is so much better.
That's true.
Personal opinion on that one, but I think Esper Sentinel is leagues ahead of Champion of the Parish.
Okay, so you're right. Esper Sentinel. Okay, I'll say that is the best 1-drop in the deck. But Champion of the Parish is close second because it's on theme. That's all I'm going for. We'll go. Hey, how about we go to another 1-drop? We got Mother of Runes in here, man. Mother of Runes is just 1 for a 1/1 human cleric. She just taps. Says target creature you control gains protection from the color of your choice to end her turn. She just gives protection to something. I think it's pretty important, especially if someone's trying to target something. So had to throw Mom in here.
Mom's good.
I'm also throwing in Tireless Tracker. Tireless Tracker is 2 and a green for a 3/2 human scout. That states whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, investigate. In case you don't remember what investigate is, you create a clue token that says pay 2 and sack the artifact to draw a card. And whenever you sack a clue, put a 1/1 counter on Tireless Tracker. So essentially, it's got landfall to investigate. If you have doubling season, you get 2 clues. Whenever you sack clues, you get 2 counters, 4 counters. It's Tireless Tracker can grow pretty quickly if you got doubling season out.
Plus, bonus points for this being a card that came from, well, the last time we were on Innistrad.
That's true. We're putting Innistrad stuff in here. And I'm also adding from the last video, if you watched it, Basri's Lieutenant. Basri's Lieutenant is 3 and a white for a 3/4 human knight. It's got vigilance and protection from multicolored. States when Basri's Lieutenant enters the battlefield, put a 1/1 counter on target creature you control. Whenever Basri's Lieutenant or another creature you control die, if it had a +1/+1 counter on it, create a 2/2 white knight creature token with vigilance. Great card. Let's say there's a board wipe. You got all your counters. You're making all 2/2s when they all die. And if you have the Ozolith, put all those counters on one of your 2/2s and attack next turn. It's going to be mean. I just think it fits on theme. It works perfectly.
Pretty solid card there. Now, what cards, if any, do you think maybe also make this inclusion from the new Innistrad set? Because I know that there's a lot of human tribal stuff that goes on in there too.
Definitely. There is a lot of cards that I threw in. Not a lot. Five cards from the new set that I was like, I have to put these in here. All these cards are super cheap. First one being Catilda Dawnheart Prime. Catilda is a green and a white, so it fits our colors for a 1/1 human warlock. It's got protection from werewolves. Ignore that line. It's irrelevant. Second line says human creatures you control have tap, add 1 mana of any of this creature's colors. Also has another ability that says pay 4 a green and a white and tap Catilda. Put a 1/1 counter on each creature you control. Catilda is amazing in this deck. It makes all your humans into mana dorks, and it has the ability to put counters on everything. So, slam dunk.
This is how you get your doubling season out on turn, 3?
Exactly. It is wild. Another card from the new set I'm putting in is Adeline, Resplendent Cathar. Adeline is 1 and 2 whites for a star 4 human knight. It's got vigilance. It states Adeline's power is equal to the number of creatures you control. And whenever you attack for each opponent, create a 1/1 white human creature token that's tapped and attacking that player or planeswalker they control. And remember, if you got doubling season on the field, you're making double those tokens. So it's pretty cool. Also, we're adding Sigarda, Champion of Light. Yes, I know this is not a human. This is the only angel besides the other Sigarda in this deck. Everything else is a human. Sigarda, Champion of Light is 1, a green, and 2 white for a 4/4. She's got flying and trample. It's got humans you control get +1/+1, and a Coven that states when Sigarda attacks, if you control 3 or more creatures with different powers, look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may reveal a human creature card from among them, put it in your hand, put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So the pseudo card draw, if you have Coven, is super cool. Just grab a human out of the top 5, which you probably will find because this is only humans besides this Sigarda and the other one. Unless you just hit the other Sigarda in 4 lands, which would suck. But I like your odds better hitting a human. Another card I'm adding into this deck is Sereth, the Viper's Fang. Sereth is 2 and 2 green for a 3/4 human warlock. It states other tapped creatures you control have Death Touch, and other untapped creatures you control have Hexproof. It's also got another ability that says pay 1 and tap Sereth. That's and untap another target creature or land you control. So if you're swinging in with all your stuff and they don't have vigilance, I know a lot of this stuff I can give vigilance, but if they don't have vigilance and you're swinging in and tapping your creatures, all of them have Death Touch. It's going to make your opponent really think about what to block. But
Yeah, I really like that.
if they are swinging in and they have hex and they have vigilance, everything has hexproof. That's amazing. You can't target my stuff. And finally, the last new card that I'm throwing into this, because our deck is designed to win with combat damage, this is a must. This is Unnatural Growth. I've seen this card in Standard, and it does work. Unnatural Growth is 1 and 4 green for an enchantment. It says at the beginning of each combat, double the power and toughness of each creature you control to end a turn. So remember, that's on your combat and all of your opponent's combat. Your stuff is doubling as blockers and attackers. So that's amazing.
Making stuff really big. Although, not gonna lie, for this card, I feel like it's almost a little taboo considering the artwork for it has nothing to do with humans except for the humans there are like running away.
Hey man, we don't talk about card art around here. We talk about what's on theme.
I get it. All right, so we just talked about a ton of cards that we wanted to include to make this deck a little bit better as far as beating face goes. What are some other cards that we can include into this deck to make it just function a little bit more smoothly?
Well, I'm just adding some lands that I think are needed in counter decks and also just fit. Karn's Bastion. Karn's Bastion is a land that taps for colorless mana. You can also pay 4 and tap it to proliferate, so you can choose any number of permanents and or players, then give each another counter of each kind already there. So essentially you're giving all of your stuff that have counters another counter. If you have doubling seizing, you give them 2 counters. Or if you want to add more counters to your planeswalkers, do that too. You get 100 life if you subtract 8. You also, I'm adding Gavany Township. Gavany Township is another land that taps for a colorless. And it also has pay 2, a green and a white, and you can tap it to put a 1/1 counter on each creature you control. Again, the counter theme, so good. But I'm also adding stuff that doesn't only tap for colorless mana, like Castle Ardenvale. That is a land that says it enters the battlefield tapped unless you control a plains, which you could very well. Taps to add a white. You can also pay 2 and 2 whites to tap it to create a 1/1 human creature token. If you have doubling season, you're making 2. And finally, just a bit of mana fixing. I added Fabled Passage. If you guys don't know what Fabled Passage does, it's a better Evolving Wilds. You tap it, you sack it, search your library for a basic land card, put it on the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. If you control 4 or more lands, untap that land.
All right, pretty solid inclusions there.
Yeah, it fits on theme.
All right, so added in an absolute ton when we're talking about this. Now, if we're adding things in order to make that come back down to 100, obviously we've got to cut some crap out. What did you remove?
So yeah, we don't need curses. Curse of Conformity, Curse of Clinging Webs, gone. Get them out of my face. We don't need to enchant players and do stuff that doesn't fit on theme. Curse of Conformity, enchant player, non-legendary creatures, enchanted player, control have base power 3/3 and lose all creature types. Curse of Clinging Webs says whenever a non-token creature enchanted player control dies, exile it and create a 1/2 spider creature token with reach. I don't need any of those. They don't fit my human theme. They don't fit my counter theme. Get them gone.
All right. Okay, so we got out the curses. What other cards do we decide deserved to just kind of get the boot here?
Well, I'm getting rid of all the expensive stuff. As you saw previously, what I added a bunch of 1-drops and smaller drops. So I'm completely changing the curve of this deck, especially the back half. We're getting rid of a bunch of expensive stuff like Death's Presence. Get that enchantment out of my face. That's 6 mana. That says whenever a creature you control dies, put X/1/1 counters on target creature you control, where X is the power of the creature that died. Cool. It's the counter thing. Too expensive. Don't want it. 2 cards that are similar, Somber Wild Beastmaster and Trostani Summoner. Both cost 7 mana for a 1/1. That is stupid. I understand they make tokens, but none of the tokens they make are humans. So get them gone. Dearly Departed is another card I'm getting rid of. That is 6 mana for a 5/5 that basically wants to be in the graveyard, but you can't just throw it into the graveyard, and nothing in our deck is able to do that. Just take stuff and throw it. So I can use that 6 mana elsewhere. Speaking of 6 mana, we got Enduring Scale Lord, getting this out of the deck. This is a dragon. Like I said previously, we are getting rid of everything that is not a human, minus the 2 Zagarda Angels. So sorry, Enduring Scale Lord, you are not going to make the cut. We're getting rid of Hour of Reckoning. Hour of Reckoning is 7 mana. I know it has Convoke that says your creatures can help cast this spell. Destroy all non-token creatures. We have 2 other board wipes in the deck already. Don't need a third, and we especially don't need one that is at worst 7 mana. So get it out of here. We're also getting rid of Sigarda's Vanguard. This is a little less expensive at 5 mana, but it is an angel, a 3/3, and it doesn't really do too much. I know it says when it enters or attacks, choose any number of creatures with different powers. Those creatures gain double strike. That is nice, but we're sticking with the human tribal theme. And this one was hard to remove out of the deck. This is Angel of Glory's Rise. It is 7 mana for a 4/6 angel. I know it says when it enters, return all human creature cards from your graveyard to the battlefield. That is sweet. That is really sweet. But for 7 mana and an angel, I want to use that 7 mana on stuff that I was building around.
Yeah, I'd rather kill your opponent than have like the, oh shit, everything has like gone horribly wrong. Let me pray that this thing is in my hand.
Yeah, pretty much.
All right, what else did we cut?
Well, we cut out a bunch of creatures. I'm going to start with the creatures that aren't humans. So you know straight out, I'm getting rid of them because they're not humans. That includes Wall of Mourning. Wall of Mourning is a wall that is really bad for 2 mana for a 0/4 that says when it enters, exile a card from the top of your library face down for each opponent you have. And then you don't get it unless you have Coven. So you could lose those cards. It's just a bad card. No thanks. I'm getting rid of Herald of War. That is 5 mana for a 3/3. Another Angel. I get it. It makes sure humans cost less. And when it gets counters, it's an Angel. It's gone. I'm also getting rid of Kerbis Harvest Celebrant. I know he wants to be a savior of the humans, but he is a tree folk. I don't need him in the deck. Sorry, Kerbis. You've been friends with the humans, but we don't need you. I'm also getting rid of Gyre Sage. Gyre Sage is 2 mana for a 1/2 elf druid. I know you can have it grow and you can make it a giant mana dork, but eventually it's not going to work. And it's an elf druid. Again, we want humans in this deck. So it's gone. Another card we're getting rid of is Verdurous Gearhulk. That is a construct. For 5 mana, it's a 4/4. When it enters the battlefield, distribute 4 counters to any number of target creatures you control. We have a bunch of stuff that does this already in our deck. We don't need a construct that takes up a human spot. Goodbye. Now, I did remove other humans, but they didn't do as much as I wanted them to do. For example, We're getting rid of Bastion Protector. Bastion Protector is actually the most valuable card in the entire deck, which is wild. But it doesn't do enough. What it does is it's 3 mana for a 3/3 that says commander creatures you control get +2/+2, have indestructible. If you don't have your commander out, it's just a 3/3. That's it. That's all it's doing.
That's the most expensive card in the Precon, by the way. Not in all the things that we've been talking about today. Just the Precon.
Just the Precon, right? Right out of the box, that's the most expensive card, and it doesn't do anything unless your commander's out. So, what does that tell you about the Precon deck? Another card that we're getting rid of is Sigardian Zealot. Sigardian Zealot's 5 mana for a 3/3. It says at the beginning of combat on your turn, choose any number of creatures with different powers. Each of them gets +X/+X, gains vigilance until end of turn, where X is Sigardian Zealot's power. At worst, it stays 3, so they're only getting +3/+3 vigilance. I know we're going to be adding counters and stuff, but for 5 mana, I want to do stuff a little differently. So Sigardian Zealot, say goodbye. Another card is Custody Soulbinders. Custody Soulbinders is 4 mana for a 0/0. It says it enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it, where X is the number of other creatures on the battlefield. You can also pay 3 to remove a 1/1 counter from it to create a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying. Again, it's not making humans, and at worst, it comes in as a 1/1 for 4 mana. No thanks. Get it gone. Goodbye, Custody Soulbinders. Another card that we're getting rid of is Wild Beastmaster. Wild Beastmaster is 3 mana for a 1/1. It says whenever it attacks, each other creature you control gets +X/+X, where X is Wild Beastmaster's power. It's just for 3 mana for a 1/1 to start off. I don't want it. Get it gone. Dawnheart Warden is a new card we are also getting rid of. It is 3 mana for a 3/3. It's got Vigilance and it's got Coven. Yes, Coven's on our commander. So, I mean, it could potentially hit, but it says at the beginning of combat on your turn, if you control 3 or more creatures with different powers, creatures you control get +1/+0 to end a turn. That's it. We are doing better things with the cards that we are adding. So, Dawnheart Wardens, bye-bye. Orzhov Advocist, another card that I'm getting rid of. This is 3 mana for a 1/4. It states at the beginning of your upkeep, each player may put 2 1/1 counters on a creature they control. If that player does, creatures that player controls can't attack you or planeswalkers you control until end of next turn. I hate helping my opponents, so I am not going to help them kill my other opponents or kill me the next turn. So no thanks, Orzhov Advocist. You are gone. And another one we're getting rid of is Kessig Cagebreakers. Kessig Cagebreaker is 5 mana for a 3/4 that states whenever it attacks, create a 2/2 green wolf creature token that's tapped and attacking for each creature card in your graveyard. We're not making humans, we're making wolves. So 5 mana, I can do stuff better, mo better. So Kessig Cagebreakers, this is goodbye.
Lots and lots and lots of creatures that you just cut from this deck. Looks like we're not quite done yet, though. It seems to me as if you have super expensive sorcery tribal. What else did you remove?
Yeah, I'm also removing a couple of different sorceries. Bestial Menace, I'm getting out of. That is 5 mana for a sorcery that creates a snake, a wolf, and an elephant. None of those are humans. None of them are really relevant. So 5 mana can be used elsewhere. Goodbye, Bestial Menace. Biogenic Upgrade is 6 mana for a sorcery that says distribute 3 1/1 counters among 1, 2, or 3 creatures, then double the number of 1/1 counters on those creatures. Fits our theme. It really does. Really good card. But again, I'm talking about mana here. 6 mana. We have other things that double stuff. We have other things that distribute counters. Look at Johnny. He's distributing those counters too. And he can do that every turn he's on the battlefield. So, Biogenic Upgrade, gone. Another card we're getting rid of is Shamanic Revelation. Shamanic Revelation is 5 mana for a sorcery that says draw a card for each creature you control. It also says you gain 4 life for each creature you control with power 4 or greater. That's cool, but say a board wipe just happened and you just drew this card. You're not drawing any cards. So I always look at a downside of a card. Downside is too great. I don't want it. And that is exactly what this card is. Too big of a downside. Bye-bye. And just a couple other things that I'm removing as well. Celebrate the Harvest. This is a new card, another sorcery. That's 4 mana that says search your library for up to X basic land cards, where X is the number of different powers among creatures you control. Put those cards onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. I'll tell you what, if you don't have any creatures in the field, this card isn't getting anything. I don't like this card at all. So Celebrate the Harvest. Not staying in the deck. We're also getting rid of Heron's Grace Champion. Heron's Grace Champion is 2 mana and a green and a white for a 3/3. It is a human. It has flash and lifelink, and it states when it enters the battlefield, other humans you control get +1/+1 and gain lifelink until end of turn. Only till end of turn. So its stats are it's just a 3/3 lifelinker after that. Not very good. We're putting better humans in the deck. And I'm getting rid of Citadel Siege. This is 4 mana for an enchantment that states when it enters, choose cons or dragons. If you chose cons at the beginning of combat on your turn, put 2 1/1 counters on target creature you control. If you chose dragons at the beginning of combat on each opponent's turn, tap target creature that player controls. This deck would only do cons, but for 4 mana enchantment, we put other enchantments that are better at doing the counter thing. So Citadel Siege, you're out.
Wait, looks like we also cut up a couple of lands here as well. Talk us through that.
Yeah, so as we saw what we added ways to increase our mana with Mirari's Wake and Smothering Tithe and a bunch of other things. So we don't actually need 37 lands. And we added 4 other lands. So I'm removing 5 lands total. 1 forest, 2 plains as basics that are going bye-bye. Temple of the False God. I know this land taps to add 2 colorless, but I don't know how many times I've played with a Precon deck that runs Temple of the False God, and I always get this in my opening hand. It is useless because you can only activate that if you control 5 or more lands. You have to wait till turn 6 if you get a land drop every turn to activate this. It's not a good land. Another land I'm removing is Myriad Landscape, which also not the biggest fan of Myriad Landscape. I know you can sacrifice it to go get 2 basic lands, but I think the lands that we added instead of Myriad Landscape make up for it.
Wait, so those are all of our inclusions as well as our cuts. Just generally speaking, so 2 questions for you. Number 1, overall thoughts on this as it turns out. Is this something that you would want to put together and play?
Absolutely, actually. As someone that is a human tribal player myself, I run a mono white human deck in EDH already. This was a lot of fun to build. And after adding up all the prices of everything that we added, I was able to get this at $299.30. So just squeaking under the $300 price tag. I think you should go out and definitely build this if you're interested. I think it would be very powerful.
Wait, so that being my first question, my second question that I wanted to ask you was, I know that we were working with a $300 constriction on this. If you did have maybe a little bit more cash laying around, or maybe weren't working with this cap, were there any other cards that maybe you did want to include that you just weren't able to, or do you feel like you did a pretty good job encapsulating the overall like theme and feel that you were going for?
I think I definitely did the overall theme and everything, and I captured that perfectly. However, I know people are going to hate on this, But there is one card that I think could have been perfect. And I already alluded to me playing human tribal before. And that is Rick Steadfast Leader. I know it's Rick Grimes from The Walking Dead. But honestly, that is one of the greatest humans Wizards of the Coast has printed in a very, very long time. It's currently sitting at $47. So if you wanted to throw that in there, I know some of you are going to say, fuck that. I'm not buying any Walking Dead cards. I can't believe Wizard is doing this. I get it, but it is a very good human.
Also, you can add Vorinclex Monstrous Raider to the deck. I didn't because it's not a human, but it's a very good card. And honestly, if I had more money, this card would be thrown in there as well. Basically, it's kind of like doubling seizing on a creature, doubling your counters. Also limits your opponent with counters as well.
Other than that, I think this deck is perfectly on par with what I wanted to do.
Awesome. Well, this has been Guys at Magic. We hope that you've enjoyed this video. Do us a favor, go ahead and comment to this video. Leave us a like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Also, if you want to check out the deck list for this, as well as just kind of stay up to date on the pricing for what we put together here, you can go ahead and also check out the deck list in the link below. This has been a lot of fun, and we look forward to making more content.
Bye.
Later.